Yeah. Can you can't hear me on this one sec. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, so, yeah, Jack can do that.
We're the light of all the world. We are a city on not hide our lamp beneath a bushel anymore. We will shine a ray of hope that's burning bright. We are a rainbow, sign of covenant and peace, for the flood of tears will finally cease to be. Come shine your rainbow, splash your hues across the sky, paint the world in colors, proud and bold and free. We're a coat of many colors, sewn from many different threads, covering all in warmth and welcome and in grace. God said, let there be light, created every very shade. In the rainbow, each of us can find a place. We are a rainbow, sign of covenant and peace, for the flood of tears will finally cease to be. Come shine your rainbow, splash your hues across the sky, paint the world in colors, proud and bold and free. We are hope to still believe in tomorrow's better day. We are peace in a world that's torn apart. We are joy that will last in all the struggles that we face. We are love that blooms and grows in every heart. We are a rainbow, signs of covenant and peace, for the flood of tears will finally cease to be. Come shine your rainbow, splash your hues across the sky, paint the world in colors, proud and bold and free. When we face the storms of life, we will never be alone, for our God will be with us on the way. Hand in hand, side by side, we won't be frightened anymore, as the morning light of tears breaks into day. We are a rainbow, sign of covenant and peace, for the flood of tears will finally cease to be. Come shine your rainbow, splash your hues across the sky, paint the world in colors, proud and bold and free. Paint the world in colors, proud and bold and free.
Good day, everybody. Tawau and welcome. Welcome to today's event and gathering and this special time. And I'm just happy to be here. My name is Reverend Murray Pruden. I am the Indigenous Minister for Indigenous Ministries and Justice, and I'd like to welcome you all to this grand event that we have planned. And it was an event in the making, and it was just well put together. I'm so happy and hopeful for this to happen. And the event today we have is a talk and presentation by Jack Saddleback, and definitely happy and be here as well with a listening ear. But first of all, I just want to do my welcomes to all of you. Welcome to all that are attending, all our youth that are all pretty much from across Canada, and also I hear too from different parts of the world. I heard somebody saying that we possibly have somebody from Australia with us. So welcome everybody, all my relations from everywhere. Welcome, and I'm just happy to do the welcoming for you all. And with that in mind, I would also like to, first of all, thank our sponsors for today's event. I'd like to do a call out to Shining Waters region within the United Church Canada here. Thank you, Shining Waters, for your contributions to this, and also to the Ministries of Pacific Mountain region as well. And that includes LeaderShift and First Third Ministries, and also Evolve. So all my counterparts in Evolve, I remember you. I'll never forget the Evolve youth. And from my call out to all my relations and from national office with Indigenous Ministries and Justice, we're also sponsors for this, and which also includes the National Indigenous Council, the National Indigenous Elders Council as well. So I like to thank all the sponsors for their contribution to make this event happen for everybody. And again, welcome to all the youth, but also all those that are not youth that are watching as well. In whatever stream that you're watching, we welcome you, and we welcome you to sit back and listen and enjoy what you're going to hear. I want to do a quick call out to and welcome the youth for this event from Evolve in particular. I was asked to do this, so all the youth from Evolve, this is your kind of your opening to your Evolve weekend. And I remember participating last year. Hopefully you remember my face from from last year. I was the guy that was on stage leading you in worship for the 3 days, and I'm still alive. I'm still kicking. You can call me Reverend. But thanks to them all. But I also want to give a quick thanks and call out all to our organizers and their support team that are working behind the scenes and have been working constantly on making sure that this event with Jack Saddleback happens. So, I do want to shout out to Springwater, Hester Miwasinch, and from our national office with the youth coordinator for Indigenous Ministries, Pamela Evans here in Pacific Mountain Region, and Jeffrey Dale from Shining Waters region. So thank you all and your creative vision and partnership to bringing us all together. It's truly a blessing. But welcome one and all to today's event.
Thank you, Murray. I want to begin with us acknowledging the territory on which we are here together. I acknowledge that I am on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Huron-Wendat, and the Petun First Nations. This territory was subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the traditional meeting place of Toronto, where I am situated, is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that we are a treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations while being mindful of the broken covenants and treaties that have been made. You may be on different traditional territories, and as such, I invite you to input that traditional territory that you are in into the live YouTube chat now. If you do not know the traditional territory on which you live, I invite you to visit native-land.ca to find out more about that specific territory and the treaties that have been made on the territory that you live on. May we truly live into right relationships with all our relations. Thank you.
Bonjour. My name is Isabel Milwaukee, and I'm in Ojibwe territories on the shores of Lake Huron up here in northern Ontario. And as I said, my name is Isabel Milwaukee, and I'm a Bear Clan woman of the Serpent River Ojibwe. So I'd like to say that I sit on the National Indigenous Elders Council with the other elders, and I'm really, really happy to be here. And I'm going to offer the prayer in view of all the turmoil that's going on in our world. I offer this prayer. Jamanado, great mystery, giver of all life and the creator of all things. We give thanks for all the human beings who are remembering that they are vessels of your love. And we give thanks for those who are willing to set aside human differences and to embrace human similarities. We are grateful for those who are willing to put aside the conflict, the bitterness, and pain of hundreds of years of inhumanity where nations fought against nations. And now, Jamanado, Daga, we ask for peace. We give thanks for the pathways being created by the spirits of our ancestors, who taught us to honor all our relations and every race and color of humankind and every living thing. We give thanks for the Mother Earth and for all that she has provided for us. We give thanks for the love that is being offered to every child of Earth through your eternal wisdom, forgiveness, and grace. We ask that life, unity, and equality for eternity may grace the human family so that we may learn respect for each other, respect for our brothers and sisters, the creatures, our cousins, the plants and stones, and for our precious mother, the earth. We ask that all pain, all greed, all anger, and all jealousy be healed within our planetary family so that peace on earth is no longer a dream, but a living reality. And for these blessed Shamanado, we say, Miigwech Shamanado, Miigwech, Miigwech, Miigwech. Aho, Miigwech.
Riveting, captivating, real, insightful, grounded, and illuminated are just a few words to describe Jack Saddleback's journey as a Cree Two-Spirit transgender gay man. Growing up as a child, facing bullying and discrimination at school and in his community, Jack battled his severe depression and overcame his obstacles to rise above. The Indigenous champion from the Samson Cree Nation was chosen as spokesperson for Mental Health Canada and Bell's Let's Talk billboard campaign. He was also named CBC's Top 40 Under 40 and has been featured in a number of documentary films. Jack made history in 2014 by becoming the University of Saskatchewan's first Transgender Students' Union president. Working with Out Saskatoon and the International Indigenous Speakers Bureau today, Jack travels the country advocating for mental health, gender and sexual diversity, two-spirited issues, and HIV/AIDS. Jack's story embodies how one person's spirit can help transform a community and tear down the barriers that divide us. Join me in welcoming our special guest as he shares with us his message of embracing our authenticity. Jack Saddleback.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm quite excited to be able to be here with you today from all walks of life, from all corners of Canada here, and I've heard also internationally. It's a humbling experience to be able to speak with you from my lands that I'm speaking on right now. I do acknowledge that I am on Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So homelands of the Nehio, of the Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Sioux, and the homeland of the Métis as well. So I thank all of those folks for allowing me to be in these lands and to now call them my home. But when I think about home and belonging, quite often I'm taken back to a moment of isolation, of aloneness, of despair and challenges. And it brings me to the one moment when all of this culminated into sitting on a hill and contemplating whether or not I should stay in this realm. And in that moment, it was when I was having to battle the negative spirit of suicidality, and exactly where my spirit would be walking now. When would I see myself in these lands? When would I see myself in this world? How could I see myself in this world? And exactly when is it my time to find myself? So today, I'm proud to say that we can look about what really transpired that night, where it has brought me, and where this message of love and acceptance of not only myself, but of all people that walk this world and walk within different realms, you may say, how we all must come together for healing, to be able to bring about a change of time, a change in these worlds that, as my colleagues have said right before, are challenging. There's still so much hope and so much that we can look at. But without further ado, I'm going to kind of walk you through. Whoop. All right. Oh, 2 seconds here. I'm just going to quickly ask Tech to help me out as I don't see my slides. Sorry, I don't hear you.
That's okay. No, I just came back. You click the screen share and it's not showing up for you. The screen share option should be on the bottom if you move your mouse over where you're seeing everything. One of those options should be screen share.
No, that's mine. That's chat. That's my video. No, it unfortunately just gives me the... Terribly sorry about this. Does not give me that option right now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. If your slides can get to me, I can put them up quick.
That most definitely can happen.
Or if Shannon has them, she can throw them up and I can do it that way.
For sure. Shannon, we can just use those the slides from yesterday as well. I think that the unfortunate thing is the 1 or 2 slides in there, but we can get those up right away here. Well, without further ado, I think it's interesting that I am here in my own living room sharing with y'all. Full disclosure, I am business up here, but I am wearing my sweatpants. That's pretty interesting as well. I also luckily gave my cat, who is Lupin, she's currently running around right now, but I gave her as much treats as possible so she doesn't make any cat meows, as we like to say, cat cameos. She's been making a lot of those appearances. But as we do these days are simply just that, it's rolling with what's happening, and it's being able to work with what we got. And I've been glad to do many other opportunities of speaking with people all across Canada and even the world regarding Two-Spirit issues. Just yesterday, I was talking with IBM. So those are, the folks that definitely are rock stars during these tech times, where, they're an amazing organization who is looking to do some really interesting change within their own realm of being inclusive, of being equitable, and about learning about Two-Spirit histories. For yourselves, the United Church of Canada, I think it's commendable that you're looking and getting more into work around reconciliation and decolonization work, more specifically around Two-Spirit issues and how we can actually start to do this work in a way that is very accessible, but also is sustainable. I'm glad to say that I have worked with the United Church in the past as well through my own position over at Out Saskatoon and in other realms of speaking and activism, where the United Church of Canada, through your Healing Fund, actually supported and sponsored our very first Saskatchewan Two-Spirit powwow, which took place here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 2018. This was a part of our Pride festivities here in the city. And, we had some great conversations with the United Church. There was a video through the Healing Foundation that was done at this particular powwow. And for folks who don't know, first off, what a powwow is, it is a cultural celebration where individuals are being able to dance the healing dance. of their choice. Number one healing dance could be the jingle dress dance. There's also the grass dance and whatnot. But in saying so, this being a cultural celebration, the interesting thing that we're going to be discussing today is how the impacts of colonialism have introduced certain mentalities of interference within our kind of indigenous worldviews, and how some of these challenging situations and viewpoints have brought about ideas of cisnormativity. So this is the assumption that every person that you come into contact with is cisgender, which puts a lot of challenges for people who are, let's say, two-spirit or trans or genderqueer when trying to take part in our cultural celebrations. By that I mean, sometimes we have individuals who could be, let's say, trans women who are turned away from dancing their dance of the jingle dress dance. So for our Two-Spirit Powwow, we thought it was important that we revitalize these spaces for Two-Spirit people to partake and be a part of their culture, which is their inherent right. Regardless of these mentalities that colonialism had tried to place upon our thoughts and our viewpoints, and how it has definitely tried to introduce a culture of what we say is interference. Awesome, but without further ado, let's jump into the presentation. Now, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide there. Thank you. So as an Indigenous individual, all of my experiences come from my lands, and one of the experiences that you had just heard is from the Saskatoon, Saskatchewan here, and the conversations that we've been able to have. But other spaces that I walk in, and this gives me the lenses that I move throughout the world, and being as an Indigenous person, that's our home. Our homeland shape how we move in this realm. Number one, I have my Samson Cree Nation of Musqueam, Alberta. And if folks ever want to remember how to pronounce Musqueam, just think the root word of the Cree word for bear is Musqua. So just say Musqua, and then you just say cheese. So bear, cheese. Musqua, cheese. No, just kidding. But I grew up there for the first 4 years of my life on my reserve. And I have been there on and off, living with my parents or whatnot. So I go back quite often, as much as I can, but it certainly does come with challenges. And we're going to get into that a little bit more as we move along. But another space that I've grown up is Calgary, Alberta here. So I like to take myself as a cowtown boy. I got a cowtown feel to myself. And I definitely have grown up in an interesting dichotomy, is what we say. So like just differing worldviews, where Samson was and is very Indigenous heavy, a lot of ceremonies that I grew up in. But then you also have Calgary. When we moved there, I moved into a very, for lack of a better word, rich neighborhood, and very much was surrounded by a lot of people who are white settlers. So the aspect of being on the reserve and then living in the metropolitan area gave me an interesting viewpoint of the worlds that we walk in. And then last but not least, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan is my hometown. Currently, this is a place where I'm making a lot of change, doing a lot of awesome things, and we're going to go into a little bit more about that in a short bit here. If you don't mind getting the next slide. Awesome. So just a quick little view of Samson. And this house right here, yes, it looks a little rough around the edges, but this was actually the house that I have a lot of really warm and loving memories with. My grandmother, my late Nookum Alma Lee, this is her house here. And for me, I honor her spirit, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her and how she has been able to create that environment of belonging and seeing where my path is. Next slide, please. Further to that is Calgary. You know, I'm definitely out on the land doing the love that I have in that space, but it geared me up to see the challenges that Indigenous folks have to face when living in these larger colonial structures. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, being able to have these lenses and bringing it here to Saskatoon to bridge these worlds of indigeneity and larger colonialism that we need to address to be able to actually decolonize and do a lot of reconciliation work. Next slide. And this is a favorite slide to show anyone that I speak with. On the left, well, before I actually go into who this is, I'll let you know, this is my family. These are the folks that I wouldn't be here, literally, if it wasn't for the love and kindness of these individuals in front of me. That individual is not my family, but you know what? They could be a distant cousin of mine. But on the left side there is a photo of my mom. My mom and the 6 siblings that she has birthed. I'm the youngest of these 6 siblings. I like to say I'm the youngest of the first batch or the first litter, right? But one of the individuals that I had alluded to was my late Nukum Lee, and she's right there in the purple shirt. And within that home that I had talked to you about, my Nukum Lee actually raised me. Traditionally speaking, young Indigenous children, quite often the youngest, is at times given to the grandparents to be raised because sometimes the family's too big, and just to ensure that all children are taken care of. So I had the grace of being raised by my Nukum, or my grandmother. And, you know, it brings me a lot of joy to talk about her and to think about her as we actually celebrate her 4-year memorial feast on November 14th, which I'll be doing ceremony for. But in saying so, other people in my family that have certainly given me a lot of grounding is on the right side there is my dad and my stepmom, who was actually my 3rd parent. And my stepmom actually gave me my name of Jack, which I think that's really interesting that I acknowledge that, because transition itself for me, as much as it is about, you know, my own transition, this transition is a birthing, it's a revitalizing, it's a deeper understanding of who I am. And I got all of my parents to partake in varying aspects of my own gender goals and where I am. And further to that, there's my siblings right here. Thank you. Who have been a huge support in my life. Now, not necessarily all of them got it right off the bat when I had come out, I don't know, I'm about 10 times now. You know, I've come out in so many different identities as I've discovered myself, as I've questioned myself, as I question what this larger world tries to tell me who I'm supposed to be, and then question exactly who am I? It's these individuals right here, this rambunctious group and sometimes very sassy group of individuals who have really helped me to question that and given me support to do so. But next slide. But in saying so, when it comes to asking about your identity or my identity, whatever identity that we all may have, I think it's important that let's lay some groundwork about what the human experience is and how the human experience itself is diverse, and how we need to really expand what we look at and how we teach the actual human experience. So I'm going to go through these 5 different identities, which every single person has. I have these, you have these, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, your neighbors, your schoolmates, everyone is made up of these identities. So number 1, we're going to start off at the top. Gender identity. Gender is what's between your ears. So this is your internal understanding of yourself. You know, whether or not you're a girl, whether or not you're a non-binary person, whether or not you're a man, or or what have you. Regardless, gender identity as well is quite fluid. As you can see on that, it's a spectrum. Now, the second one that we're going to look at is gender expression. So that's how you look at your internal and express it to the external. So this, I can get on a soapbox and tell you that like gender norms as a whole are quite controversial because I don't like the idea of gender norms. But regardless, gender expression is how you express your internal to the external. So that's what we deem to be quote unquote masculine or quote unquote feminine or quote unquote androgynous. This is how you tell the world around you, this is how I am inside, and this is how I like to express myself. Now, the third one right there is sex assigned at birth. So this pretty much just means the meaty vessel of this sack of bones that you're walking around in. That's pretty much what sex assigned at birth is. So the interesting thing about this as well is that quite often we don't talk about the diversity even within this and how people, yes, could be female at birth, yes, could be assigned male at birth, and yes, could be intersex. But even within those three, how each individual is also very diverse. I mean, some people have mobility issues, some people are neurodivergent, and some people are lactose intolerant. And then the last two there, so the first three that I just talked about, that's all about like yourself. That's about you. The last two in regards to sexual and romantic attraction is who you're attracted to. Who floats your boat? Who are you going to be swiping right on, right? So all in all, I think it's important that we lay this foundation down of the human experience where some of the norms that we talk about or teach in society are, let's say, a person who is assigned female at birth, doctor gives them back to the guardians and they say, hey, you got a girl. And then the guardians start to encourage this young person to be very feminine, right? So that's what we call is kind of like a cisgender experience. And then further to that, what is typically taught in today's society, which is not necessarily the norm for everyone, but which is typically taught, is that this quote unquote girl is then going to be attracted to a person of the opposite gender, i.e. a man. Yes, that is one way to grow up. Yes, that is certainly correct and it's normal, but not everyone experiences the world like that, such as myself. So my gender is a man. My gender expression is quite masculine. And yes, my sex assigned at birth was female. But, all of those things, as we see, make me a transgender person. So by that, I mean the gender that I currently go by versus the one that I was assigned at birth do not, let's say, match up. Now, my sisters, they were assigned female at birth and the gender that they currently go by, quote unquote, match. So they are comfortable with that. So that would make them cisgender, right? Now, looking to even the aspect of love, I myself am married to my fantastic husband by the name of James Rushton. And if you're on any of my social medias, I post about him quite often. He's gorgeous. But I think it's important that I talk openly about my love and openly about my identities because we need to normalize the fact that the human experience is diverse and that each and every one of us is normal. And we're all unique beings. Next slide, please. And that's exactly it. Understanding that love is love. And this Sagahito Muskegee, that love medicine in Cree, that's what we say is Sagahito Muskegee. That love medicine was gifted to us from Kees Manitou or the creator. And that love wasn't our space to say who you're supposed to love or how you're supposed to love. We understood that these two beings, these beings that were brought together, they were brought together for a reason. And that is love. Next slide, please. So as we go on here, I think it's important that I quickly talk about intersectionality. Now, folks who don't know what intersectionality means, it simply gives us the understanding that we as human beings, we're never one-dimensional. we are made up of a number of different identities and experiences in life that shape our viewpoint and also shape how we interact with the world. So by that, I mean everyone's made up of, let's say, our race, our gender, our education, our class, this color of your skin. We're all made up of all of those things. And intersectionality helps us to understand that we can then also face multiple forms of discrimination at any given time. So next slide, please. And within that, for myself, when it comes to some of the identities that I hold as Jack, I myself am Cree, I am Two-Spirit, I am transgender, I'm gay, and I'm a man. So all of those 5 are, yes, they may look separate, but for me, they are all the same. You know, I cannot leave any one of those at the door. You know, I walk, any space I walk into automatically becomes a Two-Spirit space. Any mall that I go into automatically comes a trans space. So I think it's important that we acknowledge intersectionality in each of us to be able to address forms of oppression, address forms of bullying, and so many more. Next slide, please. Because in my life, in my life, I've had to deal with all of those aspects. Sorry, just one back. Thank you. In my life, I've had to deal with so many of those aspects of challenges, where the aspect of being Cree, of facing racism, of being Two-Spirit, how colonialism has tried to systematically eradicate that portion of our culture, so I couldn't see myself. How being trans and how this larger society has a lot of transphobia, and being gay, there's a lot of homophobia. And unfortunately, even as a man, the aspect of sexism and what that looks like for people who are in those areas of oppression. How can I use that to ensure that I'm trying to make change? But it also puts me in many difficult situations where I'm the subject of these oppressions. So next slide. So, you know, I gave you a little bit of insight about some of the stories that you're going to be hearing today. Is that being a Cree, Two-Spirit, transgender gay man hasn't been the easiest. But I will let you know that there definitely are points in my life, even today, that I can look back on and see myself and know exactly where my groundings have taken place. Now, everything wasn't always challenging in my life. We have, when I was growing up in the Samson Cree Nation in Musquecheese, Alberta. This is me in the little pink overalls. I'd love to get a new pair of those. But that's me, my sister Sabrina, and my mom Cheryl. Now, growing up, I didn't feel those oppressions. Now, I think this is interesting because it really highlighted for me, when looking back, how my family have always been in Indigenous worldviews. And it wasn't until we started to interact with the larger colonial system that these worldviews had to chameleon themselves in a way for protection. But growing up, I would wear whatever I wanted to. You know, I was very much a genderqueer kid. I didn't, yes, I did wear pink, but it was always like a compromise between me and my mom, or, you know, whoever was dressing me that day. I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll wear these purple pants. Oh, but I want this Spider-Man t-shirt, right? So I was a very genderqueer kid. And when I think about the Indigenous worldview of parenting and how I was able to have autonomy, was that Indigenous worldview have this deep understanding of non-interference. It is not for us to tell a person how they're supposed to be. And this stems itself from how we see the stages of life. Now, there are about 7 stages of life, and the very first one is the baby stage. Now, the baby stage actually isn't translated as baby. The baby stage is actually translated into a spirit that is lent down to this realm, down to this vessel from the realm where Kis Manitou lives, the creator lives, and how this spirit is then in our protection. It's simply being lent to us. It's simply being lent to this realm to do the work it needs to do the skills and take up the responsibilities and create change for a better tomorrow. So I think it's interesting that that very first stage of life is taught like that, because I think in my own experience of growing up, that's exactly what we embodied. The Cree culture and understanding that so long as the child is happy, the community is happy. Next slide, please. And how the aspect of growing up as a young genderqueer kid in ceremony was, it wasn't seen as anything abnormal. You know, my family and my community simply just wanted me to be. And, you know, as I had gone into ceremony itself, we, that being myself, didn't have to adhere to a certain dynamic. You know, I didn't have to wear a dress. I didn't have to wear a skirt when going into a ceremony with my medicine man, who was actually from the Navajo region. And how this medicine man really was a part of the Native American church. And for folks who have heard it, for folks who haven't, the Native American church was actually started in the United States when everything was outlawed. That being our ceremonial celebrations and gatherings were outlawed by the United States government and the Canadian government. So we couldn't actually gather to be able to do these. So my medicine man was a part of this Native American church, and he brought that up from the Navajo region as well, along with all of the other folks that were involved, where he was then the medicine person that I grew up with. So when going into ceremony, he didn't say, you have to go sit on this side of the lodge, you got to go sit on that side of the lodge. He just encouraged us as young people to take part in our ceremony, to be Indigenous people, practicing our prayer, practicing our sacred roles. And I think it's interesting as we go along here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Navajo, but he's one person in my life who helped me get grounded in ceremonial aspects and know that all I had to do was just come as who I am and just be. Now, the other side of things is my parents, who, like my dad here, understood that I'm going to be walking into this larger colonial structure. And they saw little Jack. They saw me as me. But they could only create this safety, this loving environment inside the home. They knew that as soon as I left that environment, they couldn't guarantee that same safe, affirming space. So as I got older, they started to encourage me to chameleon into this world. Next slide, please. And in saying so, when I think about my family and that chameleon aspect that they started to encourage me in, was to build me up, put some armor on me, to then walk into a world that tried to tell me that I'm supposed to be a girl. So they would encourage me to be more feminine, to wear dresses, to, try and have my hair long. But, here I am. There's the proof right there in on your screen, is that I'm a little stubborn. I'm a little stubborn in regards to being seen as who I am, and understanding that there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. where even in grade 1 with this picture there, I still wear a lot of vests and denim shirts, yes. But my hands have actually gotten much bigger than they were in grade 1. Those are actually real life crayons. Like, they didn't blow those crayons up or anything like that. It was about this big. So I did grow into my hands. That's good news. But needless to say, my parents tried to give me this armor because they knew I was going to be facing a lot of bullying. I was going to be facing a lot of hardships in life. And they were right. They were absolutely right that I was going to be facing hardships. Next slide, please. Where I myself, growing up in the education system in this larger society, consistently came upon challenges. And just everyday challenges, of being in the classroom and dressing as who I was, where my classmates would always look at me, if it was the very first day, they'd be like, well, what are you? Are you a boy or are you a girl? Just based on the way that I dressed. And I would always dread when the teacher would be doing roll call the very first day, because I never went by my first name. It was always by my second name. And I always loved my second name. But just having to consistently out myself and to stand up to these systems, even at a young age. Well, right here, I believe I'm still in grade 1 in this photo. But having to stand up to systems in ways where we don't really think that we have to. Number 1 was the bathroom situation. The bathroom situation was a tough space for me, where it's just simply a basic human need. We all use the washroom. And I remember one day in grade 1, I put up my tiny Jack hand and I said, hey, teacher, I got to use the washroom. And the teacher says, all right. So by grade 1, I already know that, my parents are telling me to use the girls' washroom. My teachers are already telling me to use the girls' washroom. So fine, I guess that's where I go. And I remember going over into the hallway there, and I got to the door where the girls' washroom was. And I had put my hand up there, and I was just about to go in. But then I heard this large, hey! And I stopped. I was like, well, what is that? And there were these group of boys at the front there that said, hey little boy, you can't go into the girls' washroom. You got to go into the boys' washroom. And this feeling of anxiety came over me, this feeling of fear and just utter blushness, because this is a situation that I had faced many times before, even at the little age of 6, where I had my hand on the door and I thought, do I get in trouble with my teachers and possibly my parents and go into the boys' washroom? Or do I risk the very real physical threat in front of me and potentially have these folks come and rip me out of this washroom and possibly do physical harm to me? So I took a deep breath and I ran in and I closed the bathroom stall and I sat and I waited with a heavy heart to see if these boys would come and try and bully me again. But the door opened and footsteps came over and there was a door that was being knocked. And it was my teacher assistant of Mrs. Carr, who once again asked, can you open the door, please? And I opened that door and she saw the tears in my eyes. And all I could see in hers was just this sadness of, I'm sorry that you have to go through this again. Next slide, please. Now, these challenges over the years had created a lot of isolation, a lot of feeling like I didn't belong, because my curriculum wasn't telling me anything. The books we were reading in school didn't tell me anything that I could see that could reflect me, you know, the color of my skin, the way that I'm experiencing gender, all of these other aspects. You know, my curriculum was not doing that for me. The mainstream media as well was not being able to reflect these challenges that I was having, these feelings of isolation, of anxiety, of just like, who am I? And sadly, it got to a point in my life where it got so bad that I got so disconnected from even my own being that I unfortunately tried to take my life. And I remember exactly the space that I wanted to do it at was this very traditional Indigenous gathering place, where I had decided that where I've always been happy has been within my ceremony, has been within my people. So I went to this hill, and I remember being in the process and just feeling so hollow, feeling so alone. And it was late at night as I took that knife in my hand and I looked up and I stared even farther into the night sky, where our star people live, where our ancestors are. And in that moment, as there was blood dripping from my arm, there was something that spoke to me and said, no, now's not your time. And I don't know what that event was. I don't know who it was. I couldn't even explain to you what that feeling was, truly. But I knew that deep down, something was speaking to me. So I left that hill and I walked to try and be somewhere. I didn't know where I was going. My feet were pulling me in a direction. And I got to this road, and it was very late at night, not a lot of people there. But this car came up and saw that I was in trouble, saw that I was bleeding. And they started making a call. And then all of these other cars started to come forward and stop. And they didn't have to stop. It was late at night. They didn't have to go and go out of their way, but they saw this young person in need. And I'll never remember any of their faces, but I will always remember the warmth of them around me. As one of them took a blanket from their car and wrapped it around my shoulders and said, everything is going to be okay. Next slide, please. And that's just one story of many. You know, that's just my own journey, to think of all of the other young trans youth who don't see themselves, who feel so alone, for any sort of youth as well, how challenging it is during these days. And the high suicide rates that we have. These are epidemics that we need to address, that we need to create love, that we need to ensure that Sagihito Muskegi, that love medicine, is blossoming in these spaces for that healing to take place. Next slide, please. And over the years, once that had happened and I started my journey of healing, I decided to go back into ceremony. And luckily enough, during those healing years and my road to recovery, we say, I had moved back to my reserve. And I was living on Samson at that time and going to the Ermineskin Junior Senior High School. If anyone's gone there, shout out to you. And I remember being in grade 10, and my grade 10 English teacher took me into her office, and I'm a very flamboyant individual, I suppose you could say. You know, I'm very out about who I am. And I never actually come out to say that during that time that, you know, I was queer, or, you know, the love that I had for people isn't heterosexual or heteronormative, but people could tell. And I remember she took me into her office there, and she's like, Jack, I never want to assume. All right. I never want to assume, but I'm going to just give you this book. I'm just going to slide it across the table. You go ahead. If you want to read it, feel free to. If you like it, awesome. If you don't, no matter. All right. I'm not going to assume. But she slid this book, The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon, across the table, and I ate this thing up like it was the best pie of my life. This was my first interaction with any sort of like two-spirit literature. This particular book gave me some insights that, oh my goodness, other people who are Indigenous are also queer and also have aspects of themselves that are celebrated within their own culture. And it blew my mind to see this. That one interaction literally put me on a path of self-discovery. And for yourself, if you're an ally, or if you're a person who sees someone who's struggling, maybe it's that one line, maybe it's that one lifeline that you're putting out there for people. But engaging with someone to think about identity, maybe their own that they could be struggling with, is huge. And from there, I went on a very interesting journey. So we're gonna go to the next slide here, of learning exactly what Two-Spirit is. And for me, this is the definition that I use quite readily because of some of the historical facts we're gonna jet through here. So Two-Spirit itself is a pan-Indigenous term that acknowledges the historical acceptance of gender and sexual diversity prior to colonization, and how this term speaks specifically to the experiences of Indigenous peoples and the disruption of this historical acceptance in some communities, not all communities, due to colonialism. So being a Two-Spirit person in today's context, in current context, is interesting. There's a lot of discussion around it, but anyone who is queer and Indigenous can take up this umbrella term and be Two-Spirit. However, in saying so, prior to colonization, being Two-Spirit was largely based around a person's gender, so what's in their spirit, versus who they're going to be laying down on their buffalo robes with. It was we understood that love is love, but what we need to respect is that spirit. Right? Next slide, please. And my journey over the years have brought me to really see that this is in every space of Indigenous communities, where you got Wiwa, who's with the Zuni tribe, and the Ihamana tradition, which is a gender beyond male and female. Next slide, please. Where you have Huston Kla'a, who is Navajo, and was a part of the Naudle tradition. Huston Kla'a was instrumental in being able to protect the traditional sand paintings of Navajo people because they saw what was coming. And they used their aspects of being a medicine person to protect those sacred teachings of sand painting for the Navajo. Next slide, please. And even Oshtish, who was a very gifted warrior, but never actually took up war until absolutely necessary, because they were better known as finds them and kills them, because they were so good at shooting and worship, but they never used that because it was all about peace, and that would only ever come out if absolutely necessary. Next slide, please. And in saying so, other spaces and other people, I should say, such as Logen, who, next slide, please, who was known as the protector of the people. Logen, as well as many other Two-Spirit people that we've been able to look at throughout the years, are known as Two-Spirit because they have this innate desire to balance things. They always want the goodness for all. And in some ways, it would translate itself into, such as Wiwa. Wiwa was a very good negotiator and actually went to the United States government to go and negotiate on behalf of their people. But the reason why Wiwa was told to go and do that negotiation on behalf of their people is because Wiwa, as a gifted Two-Spirit person, always negotiated as well for the betterment of the other side. So there was that balance. And further to that, let's look at Logen, who was a gifted medicine person. Logen had this ability, as well as many other Two-Spirit people, to live in different realms. They could live in this physical realm, these things that you can touch, right? But also in the spirit realm, those little tinglies on the back of your head, that's the other realm. Now, the reason why Two-Spirit people were so revered in many spaces was because they just happened to be gifted with that ability to do so. They were often gifted as protectors of the people, where Logen could, or Two-Spirit people could heal your physical ailments, but also heal your spiritual ailments. Where Logen was a gifted prophet because they could feel, by rubbing their hands together and saying a certain sacred chant that they were given, they could feel where the enemies were coming from. And they used that for the protection of their people. Next slide, please. So over the years, this blew my mind to see that, oh my goodness, there are other people like me. There are ancestors like me. And I'm not alone. I'm not just me. I'm this string of other people and another continuous string of folks that are behind me. They're still yet to be born. Now, when it came to the aspect of Two-Spirit, my own journey with it, it always comes back to my culture and about where I see myself as an individual. Now, here are my grandparents on my dad's side, and they helped me really see myself. And when I had, I never came out to them in regards to like who I was bringing home, because I understood that they're going to love whoever I bring through the door. But I needed them to see who I am as a being. And I remember being so absolutely scared to come out to them as a man, because I really had no idea what they would say. And I had such anxiety when I decided today is the day. And I sat in their living room and I felt just this ball of energy, just this heat in me that I can't even, it's eating a bad burrito, right? And it's like, it's not sitting right. That's pretty much how it feels to come out. And I remember my grandfather and my grandmother saw that something was up, and my grandfather, he walked over and he knelt down in front of me, and my grandmother actually sat behind him. And I told them, I'm scared to tell you this because I don't know if you're going to love me after this. But I'm a man and I kind of don't know where to go from here. And I remember looking at my grandfather and his eyes that just spoke wisdom. But it was my grandmother right behind him that spoke up first. And she said, you know what, Jack? We don't know of anyone like you in our family, but we want to help in whatever way we can. There's a medicine man who's coming in about 7 days here, and you can ask for some guidance. And I remember taking a deep breath, and I looked out onto the porch and saw the invitation of the warm autumn day and the door that I could have easily walked out of, because now they knew who I was. But then I looked back to my grandfather, and the look of wisdom in his eyes told me and spoke to me that something was to be learned here. So I agreed to stay, and for those 7 days, it was as if I stepped back to being just a young person and the roles that I always had. I always was helping outside, I was helping inside. I wasn't, adhering to one quote unquote gender role. I was just helping wherever I could. And the 7th day came, and the medicine man, who I never met before, this medicine man was different from the Navajo medicine man that I had grown up with. And we sat down in ceremony, and I'm not going to go too much into exactly what this happened in ceremony, but I will give you some insights about where I saw all of this wisdom that needed to be addressed. So I'm in the room with the medicine man on my right and my grandparents on my left. And as we're moving through the ceremony, the medicine man says, I'm going to be speaking in my own language. And as I go along, I'm going to say some English so you can follow along. I said, okay. He says, and I'm going to give you these items for you to pray with. So as we're going, you go ahead and you pray whatever way that you need to, that you feel inside you. I said, okay. And then as we're going along, he says, Jack, there's another spirit inside you that's, kind of making you think like this. And my brain kind of exploded in that time, because as I was doing all of this asking of Two-Spirit teachings and whatnot, quite often it was told that people who are Two-Spirit, yes, they live in, let's say, two different realms, but quite often they have like energies within them that flow that could be seen as quote unquote more than one spirit. So in that moment, I saw myself. But as time went on, he said, you know what? I'm going to continue on here. And then he starts to say little English words of a lost path, of the natural attraction between a man and a woman. And something starts to not feel right for me. And then he says, I'm going to take this spirit out of you. And I was crushed. I felt so hurt in that moment, and I couldn't really find the words for it or how to even address it. But this cultural leader, my cultural leader, thought that there was something wrong with me. And in that moment, I prayed as he was going through his ceremony. I prayed and I thought back to when I was most happy, when I felt most at home in my being and in my spirit. And it always came back to ceremony and how I would just be, and how I was just walking into any space with my own self. And even though I was hurt in that moment, and even though I could have walked away, I knew that something spoke to me in that moment. Next slide, please. And I cried. I cried quite heavily because I felt pushed. I felt like I wasn't allowed in my own community. And I remember going back to my grandmother, my late Nukumli, who raised me, and I told her what happened. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, Jack, I'm glad that you told me this, because now I see you. I see you've always been Jack. You've always been this way. And I'm glad that you're here. And I'm glad that you can see things now. Because in that moment, it made me realize what exactly was happening was that colonization, colonialism had introduced transphobia and homophobia even into our own ceremonies. And my grandmother affirmed what I was feeling inside, that we needed to address these issues and we needed to talk about this. So in my journey, and that affirmation and support that I got from her brought me to this. Next slide, please. To understanding that affirmation is in our language, it's in our teachings, it's in that baby stage where the Spirit is lent to us, where we see that our historical acceptance of gender and gender diversity is in our language. And then we can look and see that there's Iskwegan, which roughly actually doesn't translate to woman, it actually translates to fire being. And how you have Iskweo, which is woman. You have Iskwegan, which is, for contemporary terms, is trans woman or trans feminine person. You have Iogweo, which is non-binary gender fluid person. You have Napigan, who's trans man or trans masculine person. And you got Napeo. These three in the middle here are called a Toss-to-Winnowak. And the Toss-to-Winnowak is the in-between society and how they had certain sacred roles in society. because they had to walk in the other energies, where if you were to look at this as a circle, right? And this is the entrance to the teepee, Napegan would typically be people who are firekeepers, because they had to walk in between the Napeo roles and the Isqueo roles. And then you had Isquegan, which would have to walk in between those other roles. So we had extra responsibility in knowing all of the gender roles, so we knew how to conduct ourselves in ceremony in respectful ways, so we could uplift people and create that balance. Next slide, please. And how through these affirmations of self, we're going to see that the high rates of suicidality has come down since talking about these issues, since talking about these ceremonial roles, and really opening people's eyes into the reality of our cultural spaces. Next slide, please. And how over the years we've been able to really push for change. Next slide, please. But this change has really been through the resiliency of acceptance of the diversity of the human experience. We need to embody a culture of non-interference and be ourselves. Next slide, please. And through that, I've been able to do that with varying works around the lands, through mental health. Next slide. Through representation and two-spirit awareness in Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities. Next slide. And through general advocacy and awareness of the diversity of the human experience. Next slide, please. But further to that, I think it's important that we also address actually doing systemic change. Awareness is awesome, but we also need to do equitable systemic change. Where my year as the USSU president, we were able to mushroom in or grandfather in Indigenous content into all degree programs at the University of Saskatchewan, where we now have people are learning about Indigenous issues. This is a huge, huge win for all of Canada. Next slide, please. Because when you're passionate about the work you do, you're passionate about creating change, you're passionate about bringing and revitalizing this Sagihito Miskigi, it opens doors for others to see themselves in a better world. Next slide, please. Where I now understand that I am Kanitokska. This is the name that I have was given as just a young baby. And for years, I didn't know exactly what Kanitokska meant. I didn't know how to embody that. But for myself, the way it translates in my Musqueam's dialect of my area is that Kanitokska actually means that whenever this spirit enters a room, there will be a good feeling. And it's a gender neutral name at the same time. I don't know exactly how I came about all of this, but I think it's important that I acknowledge my spirit name, because that is my gender. That is who I am as a person. And I'm glad to say that I am a Nehiao, Tostawinawak, Napegan individual. Next slide, please. But as I share all of these hardships, as I share the aspect of being a young Indigenous person, not feeling safe, not feeling like I am included in just this general society, to also then looking at, let's say, my own ceremonial spaces and how colonialism has done such a damaging effect on the everyday aspect for young Indigenous children, young trans kids, two-spirit kids, to also even within our own ceremony spaces where it tried to infect our mentalities and try to get us to think in a way of interference, where we need to break these down and we need to decolonize and reinvigorate that Sagihito Miskigi. But we can only do that when we're embodying these 7 generations teachings of understanding that all of those ancestors that you saw on the screen there, they made as many choices as possible to ensure that every decision they made was to make it better for me today, for you today, And we need to ask ourselves, how can I be a good ancestor for those generations that are behind us and are yet to be born? Because if there's one thing I know, next slide please, is that there have never been, nor will there ever be, any closets and teepees. So I'll leave it there, and I'll leave these calls to action here when I'm talking about my journey. Just please, your calls to action is learn, read books, read articles, get basic definitions, get basic terminology, explore maybe your own biases, explore how all of these aspects of colonialism have placed certain mentalities on us, and shed that. 3 is to learn about allyship is a verb. It is an action you do. It is not some pin that you put on your shoulder. It is these steps that you do in your daily life. Where number 4, you can take action. Where action can be simply as simple as saying your name and saying your pronouns every time you meet someone new. Because when you say your name and you offer your own pronouns, you automatically tell that other person that I am a safe space. If you are, let's say, a gender variant, transgender person, or a two-spirit person. Simple actions like that. We can make a world of difference, and we can revitalize that Sagahito Muskegee to ensure that every person that walks in the room, that enters these spaces, can just come as who they are. Last slide, please.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you so much for that. We're going to enter into our time of question and answer, and I have a few screens open to see if people have any questions that they would like to ask. So at this time, if you are in the YouTube conversation, you can ask those questions. I feel like I'm brimming with so many, as you shared, of your vulnerability and your honesty, and thank you for that. I too actually would like some pink overalls like those two. I think when you said you would like to get,
I love it.
I'm down for that. I think we could make a new club.
Nice. Yeah, let's twin. Let's twinning.
Yeah, perfect. So, nice. Something that really struck and stuck with me as you were talking was about your grandmother and your grandfather. And so I was wondering, what was their greatest teaching throughout your life to you?
I believe the greatest teaching that I've had with my grandfather and my grandmother on my dad's side is that culture creates us, for sure, but also that our creator, or Kis Manitou, is all around us, and you never really have to have all of these ceremonial pieces to pray and to be healed. My grandfather always said, you can simply just pick up a rock at the river, and that's your connection to Kis Manitou. That's your connection to the other realm, and to use that. And for me, over the years, that has definitely kept me grounded in knowing that my connection to this larger world is it's always within me, and I need to walk in a good way everywhere I go to ensure that I'm living in balance with all things around me and creating a better space for all generations, as my grandparents and my culture has taught me.
Wonderful. There is a question here. Can you provide us with a resource or book resource for more cultural information about the role of the in-between people in the TP you described?
Mm-hmm. So luckily enough, I do work in an organization where I've been able to explore this a little bit more. So I'm going to give you a couple of resources. Number one is, feel free to go check out outsaskatoon.ca. We do have resources for Two-Spirit folks there. We have a nice little resource page. But second is through my own social medias. So if you go into my Instagram or my Twitter, thank you. And there's my link tree. So it's linktr.ee/Jack Saddleback. I've actually started to compile a little bit of a calls to action for people to do when it comes to being two-spirit and what that means. So you're just going to see the #1 link right up there, which will give you some webinars to other spaces as well, and a direct link to that outsaskatoon.ca two-spirit page.
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
I'm just looking to see. We have a lot of people that are writing thank you and feeling very blessed for having you with us today. I suppose we'll go with one more question. And I think that question for me that really came out while you were talking was about how would you encourage young people who maybe are struggling to express their gender identity or their gender expression, but maybe also their own mental health journey, and are looking for someone to reach out and help them understand themselves a bit more? How would you encourage people to walk with them as they're trying to live their most authentic self?
So there's two separate spaces that I'll give some insight to. #1 is for the individual. So there's 3 things to know as a person who's exploring your gender and just questioning. #1 is knowing that it is completely normal and, kind of encouraged as well to just question your own gender. It's okay to question whatever aspect of your identities. That's a normal human thing to go through, and you yourself are normal. #2 is knowing that there is no right way there's no wrong way to express, I should say, your gender. What it means to be a man is it's its own thing. There's no right way for masculinity. There's no right way for femininity. There's no right way for androgyny. Whatever way that means and speaks to you, that is up for you, and that is for you to decide. And whatever way that you do express yourself, just know that you got a cheerleader over here, like saying those high pumps that you're wearing, those pink overalls that you're wearing look amazing. All right. So whatever way that you want to express yourself, I hope that you know that my heart is with you, and the freedom that you have is phenomenal. #3, and this is an important one, especially when it comes to mental health, is to connect with affirming spaces. So whether or not that's queer youth groups, going and just connecting with other queer youth, being able to, let's say, connect with an affirming chaplain that you have as well, who's able to let you know and reiterate that you yourself are made as who you are. You were brought here as that little spirit, and your roles and responsibilities are up for you to find. But yeah, those 3 I would definitely let you know. Oh, and then the other side of things.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say,
Keep going.
No, it's okay. I just forgot about the other side. When it comes to allyship, I think it's important that we, #1, as allies, ask how we can support that individual, because that individual may not be ready to come out to everyone else. But let's say that person is ready and wants some assistance with other folks. I know for myself, when I came out to my grandparents, or my parents, I should say, as well, is that my parents were very much allies within our larger family group of, my aunties and my uncles, where I didn't have to go to my aunties and my uncles to have those kind of awkward conversations. It was up to my parents. And that was a way for them to be a good ally, was to ensure that they were creating that safe space in our family. And third, just to, as I said, normalize the fact that this human experience is diverse and try to make it equitable. One of those easy ways is just using your name and using your pronouns when speaking with other people. Right? Very simple ways. Sorry, go ahead.
Wonderful. No. This is great, Jack. There was a really
Okay.
great question here. So this will be our final sort of question in the question and answer time.
Mhm.
It says, you have led the way amid the first so many times. Have you already seen a shift in this experience?
You know, it's really humbling to look back, I think, and to remember looking up into that night sky and how thankful I am that, you know, the star people that are ancestors really did speak to me in that moment. Because now when I look at things that have happened, the spaces that I've walked in, I walk with that medicine, and I walk with that Kukum love that my Nukum Lee gave to me. And that's what I try and spread wherever I go. And as the years have gone on, yes, we do have a lot of challenges in this world. We certainly do. But there's also a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity for change. Now is the time for healing. Now is the time to create this change. And I simply bring my spirit of Kanitauska to create intersectional, accessible change that is absolutely filled with that Sagahito Muskegee for everyone that I meet.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here with us tonight and sharing your story and engaging with us. I know all of us have learned such a great deal, but also I feel like I've grown in my own relationship with myself listening to your story. So thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
will share with everyone that's on this particular call that if you are on the YouTube link and you are an Indigenous youth, Jack will be speaking specifically with Indigenous youth right after we end this time of YouTube Live. So you are able to reach out to us through that link, and please do so, and we will make sure that you get on to that call. Also, we have offered up support and care. So we have the emails there that you can reach out to myself or Springwater or Pamela, and our emails. If that is tonight or days going forward, you just feel like you need someone to speak with or talk to, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are there, and we will be sure that we engage with you. Pamela is going to make an announcement for Evolve.
Thanks, Jeffrey. My name is Pamela Evans. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm part of the coordinating team for Evolve 2020 Online. And we are so excited to be able to participate in this special event tonight. And we loved what Jack had to say, and it was a fantastic time. So thank you. We're really looking forward to the Evolve conference and the rest of it, and we hope that you might consider joining us if you are youth, young adults, or their leaders on this YouTube call. You are welcome to join us, and my colleague Samantha is going to put the link where you could register now and join us for the rest of the evening's festivities. And if you are on Whova or part of the Evolve participation right now, we ask that you move out of this YouTube, if you're on YouTube, and into the keynote reflection groups as you are able. You get to choose which one you want to be part of. And then our home groups with like-minded, brilliant people will start at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So that's Pacific Standard Time, and you're going to have to adjust it for your own because I'm time zone challenged on a good day. So hopefully you can figure out what that means for you. But join us, be part of Evolve 2020 Online, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pamela. And I invite you into this time of a closing blessing. As we go from this conversation, and as some of you will be going into the Evolve conference, we invite you to go forth into the world with a daring and tender love, seeking justice and pursuing creativity. Go in peace. The world is waiting. And whatever you do it for love and in the spirit of your Creator. Amen. Thank you for being with us tonight.